It was a sunny Tuesday morning when 5-year-old Emma wandered away from her family during their visit to Buckingham Palace. The crowds were thick, and in just a moment of distraction, she found herself alone and frightened among a sea of unfamiliar faces. Tears began streaming down her cheeks as she looked around desperately for her parents. Standing perfectly still at his post was Guard James Morrison, dressed in his iconic red uniform and tall black hat. He had been trained never to move, never to speak, never to break character while on duty. But when he noticed the small girl crying just a few feet away from him, something stirred in his heart that no amount of training could suppress. Emma approached the towering figure, her tiny hand reaching out to touch his perfectly polished black boot. She looked up at him with hopeful eyes, as if this silent giant might somehow help her find her way back to safety. James could see the fear in her expression, and despite every rule he had learned, he knew he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Very slowly, so as not to startle her, James began to move. He carefully knelt down to Emma's level, his movements deliberate and gentle. The crowd around them started to notice. Phones came out, and whispers began to spread. But James didn't care about the attention. All he could focus on was this frightened child who needed help. Without saying a word, James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handkerchief. He gently wiped away Emma's tears, his stern expression softening into the kindest smile she had ever seen. Then he did something that amazed everyone watching. He began to make funny faces, crossing his eyes and puffing out his cheeks, trying to make her laugh. Emma giggled despite her tears, and James knew he was on the right track. He stood up and began looking around for signs of frantic parents. Within minutes, he spotted a couple pushing through the crowd, calling out a little girl's name. James caught their attention with a subtle wave and pointed toward Emma. When Emma's parents rushed over, they were overwhelmed with gratitude. Her mother burst into tears of relief while her father shook James's hand repeatedly, thanking him over and over. James simply nodded, gave Emma one final wink, and returned to his position, standing tall and still once again. The story spread quickly through social media, with videos of James kneeling down to comfort Emma going viral within hours. People from around the world commented on how this single act of kindness showed the humanity beneath the uniform. The palace received hundreds of letters praising James's compassion and quick thinking, but for James, the real reward came 3 weeks later when he received a drawing in the mail. It was from Emma, showing a stick figure in a red coat and tall hat holding hands with a smaller figure with pigtails. At the bottom, in wobbly 5-year-old handwriting, it read, "Thank you for helping me find my mommy and daddy. You are my hero." James kept that drawing in his locker throughout his entire career with the Royal Guard. Years later, when asked about his most memorable moment in service, he would always talk about the day a little girl reminded him that sometimes the most important duty isn't following orders but following your heart. The incident became a training example for new guards, showing them that while discipline and protocol are important, recognizing when humanity must come first is equally valuable. Emma's story proved that behind every stoic uniform stands a person capable of extraordinary kindness and compassion. Sarah Mitchell had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, but life had dealt her some difficult cards. Her fiancé David was a soldier who had been deployed overseas for 8 months, and they had planned their wedding around his brief leave. Everything seemed perfect until David's unit was suddenly called for an extended mission, just 2 weeks before their special day. Heartbroken but determined, Sarah decided to go ahead with a small ceremony at the local registry office. She would wear her grandmother's dress and marry the love of her life via video call, with David joining from a military base thousands of miles away. It wasn't the wedding she had imagined, but love would have to be enough. On the morning of her wedding, Sarah walked past Windsor Castle on her way to meet her family. She paused to look at the magnificent building, thinking about all the royal weddings that had taken place there. Guard Captain William Henderson noticed the young woman in the beautiful vintage wedding dress standing alone, looking somewhat sad despite the joyous occasion her attire suggested. William had been with the Queen's Guard for 15 years and had developed a keen sense for reading people. Something about Sarah's expression tugged at his heartstrings. During his break, he approached her respectfully and asked if everything was all right. Sarah, touched by his genuine concern, found herself telling this kind stranger about her unconventional wedding plans. Moved by her story, William made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. He asked Sarah if she would like to take her wedding photos in front of the castle, explaining that he could arrange for a brief photo session during the changing of the guard ceremony. Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement, but she worried about imposing on official duties. William assured her that sometimes the most important service is making dreams come true. He quickly coordinated with his fellow guards, and within an hour, Sarah found herself standing in front of Windsor Castle with her small wedding party, while a full ceremonial guard provided the most magnificent backdrop imaginable. But William wasn't finished with his surprises. He had contacted the castle's communications team, who managed to arrange a video connection strong enough for David to see the ceremony from overseas. As Sarah exchanged vows with her beloved through the screen, she was surrounded by the pomp and pageantry she had always dreamed of. The guards remained perfectly professional throughout the ceremony, but those who looked closely could see smiles, barely contained beneath their serious expressions. When Sarah and David were pronounced husband and wife, even though separated by thousands of miles, something magical happened. The guards began a slow, dignified clap, honoring the couple's commitment and love. The photos from that day were absolutely stunning. Sarah in her flowing vintage gown, the majestic castle in the background, and the red uniformed guards standing at attention created images that looked like they belonged in a royal wedding album. But more than that, they captured a moment when military protocol gave way to human kindness. The story caught the attention of local media, and soon Sarah and David's unique wedding was being celebrated across the country. The palace received so many positive responses that they created a small program allowing military families to have special photo opportunities during certain ceremonies, recognizing the sacrifices made by service members and their loved ones. William received a commendation for his initiative and compassion, but he remained humble about his actions. He simply said that when you see someone's dreams within your power to help fulfill, you don't hesitate. Sarah and David sent him a thank you card every anniversary for years afterward, always including a photo of their growing family. Years later, when David finally returned from his deployment, he made a special trip to Windsor Castle to thank William in person. The two men, both soldiers in their own way, shared a moment of understanding about duty, service, and the importance of protecting not just countries but the dreams and hopes of the people they serve. 83-year-old Thomas Wright sat in his wheelchair outside Buckingham Palace, his weathered hands clutching a small wooden box. His granddaughter Helen pushed his wheelchair closer to the gates, knowing this might be her grandfather's final visit to the place that held such deep meaning for him. Thomas had served as a royal guard himself nearly 60 years ago, back when the world was a different place, and the Queen was just beginning her long reign. Now, with his health failing rapidly, he had asked Helen to bring him here one last time to pay his respects. Inside the wooden box were his service medals, polished to perfection despite the trembling in his hands. Current guard Michael Stevens noticed the elderly man in the wheelchair, particularly drawn to the way Thomas sat with military posture despite his frail condition. Something about the old gentleman reminded Michael of his own grandfather, also a veteran who had served with honor and dignity throughout his life. As Michael's shift was ending, he made his way over to where Thomas sat quietly with his granddaughter. Thomas looked up at the young guard with eyes that still held the spark of a soldier, despite his age and illness. When Michael introduced himself and thanked Thomas for his service, the old man's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. Thomas began sharing stories from his time as a guard, his voice growing stronger as he recalled memories of standing watch over the royal family. He told Michael about the day he had first put on the uniform, how proud his parents had been, and how the responsibility had shaped him into the man he became. Michael listened intently, recognizing the importance of this moment. He could see that Thomas needed someone to understand what his service had meant, not just to the country but to him personally. When Thomas mentioned that he had brought his medals to show them to the palace one final time, Michael had an idea. With permission from his commanding officer, Michael arranged for Thomas to be given a private tour of the guard room, where current guards prepare for their duties. Thomas was overwhelmed as he saw how little had changed in the fundamental traditions and values of the Queen's Guard, even as so much else in the world had transformed. The most powerful moment came when Michael asked Thomas if he would like to inspect the current guard. With tears in his eyes, Thomas nodded. Helen helped her grandfather stand from his wheelchair, supporting him as he slowly walked along the line of guards standing at attention. Each guard stood a little straighter as the old veteran passed, recognizing they were in the presence of someone who had walked this same path decades before them. Thomas stopped at each position, his trained eye still able to spot a perfectly polished button or a correctly positioned hat, nodding his approval at each guard. At the end of the inspection, something extraordinary happened. Without any command being given, the guards began a slow salute to Thomas. The old man, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he still possessed, returned their salute with military precision, his back straight and his hand steady. The moment was captured by Helen on her phone, but more importantly, it was etched into the hearts of everyone present. Here was a living link to the Guard's proud history, a reminder of the unbroken chain of service that connected past and present. Thomas passed away peacefully just 3 weeks later, but Helen made sure that Michael and the other guards knew how much that final visit had meant to her grandfather. She told them that he had spent his last days telling everyone about the young guards who had honored him and made him feel that his service still mattered. At Thomas's funeral, Michael and several of his fellow guards attended in full dress uniform, providing an honor guard for their predecessor. They folded the Union Jack that had covered his casket and presented it to Helen, continuing a tradition of honoring those who served before them. The story became part of the oral tradition passed down among new guards, a reminder that they are part of something much larger than themselves, a continuing story of service and dedication that spans generations and connects them to heroes they will never meet, but whose legacy they carry forward every day they put on the uniform. Maria Santos had saved for 3 years to bring her elderly mother, Rosa, on a dream trip to London from their small village in Mexico. It was Rosa's 75th birthday gift, and Maria wanted to show her mother the places she had only seen in movies and magazines. Neither woman spoke much English, and they relied heavily on translation apps and the kindness of strangers to navigate the bustling city. On their 3rd day in London, disaster struck. While visiting the Tower of London, Rosa became separated from Maria in the crowd. The elderly woman, confused and frightened, wandered the streets for hours, unable to communicate her predicament to anyone who might help. By evening, she found herself sitting on a bench near the Tower Bridge, exhausted and crying softly. Guard Sergeant David Chen was finishing his shift at the tower when he noticed the small, elderly woman sitting alone on the bench. Something about her distress was unmistakable, transcending language barriers. David's own grandmother had immigrated from China many years ago, and he remembered the stories of her struggles with language and feeling lost in a foreign country. Approaching Rosa gently, David could immediately see she was a tourist in distress. Though they shared no common language, Rosa's tears and the way she clutched a small photo of Maria told him everything he needed to know. David sat down beside her, speaking in calm, soothing tones even though she couldn't understand his words. His kind demeanor began to ease Rosa's panic. David used his phone to access a translation app and slowly began to piece together Rosa's story. She had been separated from her daughter Maria. They were staying at a hotel whose name she couldn't remember, and she had no idea how to contact anyone for help. All she had was the photo of Maria and a small piece of paper with some Spanish writing that David couldn't read. Determined to help, David contacted the local police and explained the situation. But he didn't stop there. Using his network of contacts throughout London's tourism industry, he began making calls to hotels, trying to locate a Maria Santos who might be desperately searching for her missing mother. He also posted Rosa's photo on social media pages dedicated to helping lost tourists. As the hours passed, David stayed with Rosa, buying her dinner and making sure she stayed warm. He called his commanding officer to explain why he was extending his time away from base and was given full support to continue helping the lost tourist. David even used his own phone to call his Chinese-speaking friend to help communicate with Rosa in Mandarin, which she understood slightly better than English. The breakthrough came at nearly midnight when a hotel manager recognized the description of Maria Santos. She had been at the police station for hours, filing a missing person report for her mother. David immediately coordinated with the authorities to arrange a reunion at the hotel where Maria was staying. When Maria saw her mother, safe and sound, she burst into tears of relief and gratitude. Through a translator, she learned about David's hours of dedication to helping a complete stranger. Maria couldn't believe that someone would spend their entire evening helping her mother, asking for nothing in return except the satisfaction of reuniting a family. The story didn't end there. Maria and Rosa insisted on staying an extra day in London just to properly thank David. They brought him homemade Mexican food and small gifts from their homeland. Rosa, despite the language barrier, managed to communicate through gestures and smiles just how grateful she was for his kindness during her scariest moments in a foreign country. David was deeply moved by their gratitude, but he tried to explain, through the translator, that he had simply done what anyone should do when they see someone in need. However, Maria made sure the story reached both British and Mexican media, wanting the world to know about the British Guard who had gone above and beyond to help a frightened elderly tourist. The Tower of London received hundreds of letters and emails praising David's actions. Many were from immigrants and tourists who shared their own stories of feeling lost and frightened in foreign countries, expressing how meaningful it was to see such kindness and dedication to helping strangers. Years later, Maria and Rosa returned to London, this time bringing Rosa's great-grandchildren to see the city. Their first stop was always the Tower of London, where they would tell the story of the guardian angel in uniform, who had turned Rosa's worst day into a reminder that kindness exists everywhere in the world if you know where to look for it. Jake Morrison had been battling cancer for 2 years, and his greatest dream was to become a professional photographer before his illness progressed further. At 28, he had already lost most of his hair to chemotherapy, but his passion for capturing perfect moments had only grown stronger. His camera was his constant companion, and he spent every good day searching London for that one extraordinary shot that would launch his career. Jake had heard about a photography competition sponsored by National Geographic, with the winning photo to be featured on their cover. The theme was unexpected humanity, and Jake knew exactly what kind of image he wanted to capture. He had spent weeks photographing the Royal Guards, hoping to catch a moment that showed their human side beneath the formal exterior. On a particularly cold November morning, Jake positioned himself near Wellington Barracks, where the guards prepared for the changing of the guard ceremony. His hands were shaking from both the cold and the side effects of his medication, making it difficult to hold his camera steady. He was determined to get the perfect shot, even though his energy was fading quickly. Guard Corporal Alex Thompson noticed the young man with the camera who had been there for several days. Alex could see that Jake was unwell, but there was something about his dedication and determination that impressed the guard. Jake never bothered the guards or tried to interfere with their duties. He simply waited patiently for the right moment. During a brief break between ceremonies, Alex approached Jake and struck up a conversation. Jake explained his situation, his dreams of becoming a photographer, and his hope of capturing something special for the competition. Alex was moved by Jake's story and his unwavering optimism despite his illness. What happened next was completely spontaneous. Alex noticed a small sparrow that had landed on the shoulder of one of the guards during the ceremony preparation. The bird seemed completely unafraid, as if the guard's stillness made him the perfect perch. Alex quietly signaled to Jake, pointing out the extraordinary scene developing just a few feet away. Jake raised his camera with trembling hands, knowing this could be the moment he had been waiting for. The guard stood perfectly still, not wanting to disturb the tiny creature that had chosen him as a resting spot. The sparrow tilted its head curiously, as if studying the human statue beneath it, creating a moment of pure magic between nature and duty. But just as Jake was about to take the shot, his hands began shaking uncontrollably from his medication. The camera was too heavy, and he couldn't get a clear focus. Alex saw Jake's frustration and made a split-second decision. He moved behind Jake and gently steadied his hands, helping him hold the camera still while remaining completely invisible in the shot. Together, they captured the most extraordinary photograph. A stoic royal guard in full uniform with a tiny sparrow perched confidently on his shoulder, both creatures perfectly still in a moment of unexpected partnership. The contrast between the formal military setting and the delicate natural beauty of the bird created exactly the kind of image Jake had envisioned. The photograph was absolutely stunning, but what made it even more special was the story behind. Jake submitted the image to the National Geographic competition, including a note about the guard who had helped him capture it. The judges were so moved by both the image and the story that Jake's photograph won first place. When the magazine contacted Jake about the win, they also wanted to interview Alex about his role in creating the moment. Alex was reluctant to take any credit, insisting that Jake's vision and persistence were what made the photograph possible. However, the story of their collaboration became part of the feature article that accompanied the winning image. The photograph appeared on the cover of National Geographic with the title, "Unexpected Humanity, When Duty Meets Compassion." Jake's dream of becoming a professional photographer became reality, and he received multiple job offers from prestigious publications. More importantly, the recognition gave him a sense of purpose and accomplishment during his difficult health journey. Alex and Jake became close friends, with Alex visiting Jake regularly during his treatments. Jake taught Alex about photography, while Alex shared stories about military service and duty. Their friendship became a source of strength for both men, proving that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from unexpected moments of kindness. Jake lived for 2 more years after winning the competition, during which he created a beautiful portfolio of photographs celebrating the humanity he found in everyday heroes like the Royal Guards. When he passed away, Alex spoke at his funeral, describing how Jake had taught him that true service means seeing and helping others achieve their dreams even in the smallest ways. 10-year-old Marcus had never spoken a word in front of his classmates. Born with a severe stutter that made him the target of cruel jokes and whispers, he had learned that silence was safer than the embarrassment of struggling through simple sentences. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had tried everything to help Marcus gain confidence, but the boy remained locked in his shell of fear and shame. The annual school trip to see the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace was supposed to be educational and fun, but for Marcus it was just another day of feeling invisible among his chattering classmates. While the other children excitedly pointed and took pictures, Marcus hung back watching the magnificent ceremony from a distance. Guard Lance Corporal Simon Wells noticed the quiet boy standing apart from his school group. Something about the child's posture reminded Simon of his younger brother, who had struggled with similar challenges in school. Simon could see the loneliness in Marcus's eyes, the way he watched the world from the sidelines rather than participating in it. During the ceremony break, an unexpected opportunity arose. One of the children from Marcus's class dropped their permission slip and it blew directly toward Simon's post. Following protocol, Simon couldn't move to retrieve it, but Marcus, without thinking, quickly ran forward and picked up the paper before it could blow further away. As Marcus approached to return the paper to his classmate, he found himself face to face with the towering guard. Simon looked down at the boy with kind eyes and whispered a quiet, "Thank you," that only Marcus could hear. For a moment, Marcus forgot about his fear and whispered back, "You're welcome," the words coming out clearly and without hesitation. Simon immediately recognized something special about this interaction. During his next break, he approached Marcus's teacher and learned about the boy's struggles with stuttering and social anxiety. Mrs. Patterson explained how Marcus was brilliant and kind, but his speech difficulties had made him withdraw from all classroom participation. With permission from his commanding officer and Marcus's teacher, Simon arranged something unprecedented. He invited Marcus to stand beside him during a brief portion of the ceremony, explaining that sometimes guards needed special assistance to help with crowd management. Marcus was terrified, but also incredibly honored by this unexpected invitation. Standing next to Simon in front of hundreds of tourists, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before: importance and belonging. Simon quietly explained some of the ceremony's history to Marcus, who found himself so fascinated that he forgot to be afraid of speaking. When Simon asked him questions about what he observed, Marcus answered naturally, his stutter barely noticeable in his excitement. Transformation was remarkable. Marcus's classmates watched in amazement as their quiet peer stood confidently beside the royal guard, asking questions and even pointing out interesting details to Simon. For the first time in his school career, Marcus was the center of positive attention, and it felt wonderful. When the ceremony ended, Simon knelt down to Marcus's level and told him something that would change the boy's life forever. He explained that being brave isn't about never feeling scared, but about doing important things even when you are afraid. He told Marcus that he had shown real courage by helping retrieve the paper and by standing with him during the ceremony. Simon then did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He removed one of his ceremonial pins and presented it to Marcus, explaining that it was a symbol of bravery and service. He told Marcus to keep it as a reminder that he had what it takes to be courageous, even when speaking felt difficult. The impact on Marcus was immediate and lasting. On the bus ride back to school, he began talking to his classmates about the ceremony, his excitement overcoming his usual fear of stuttering. His teacher was amazed to hear Marcus volunteer to give a presentation about their trip to the rest of the school. Marcus's confidence continued to grow over the following months. He joined the school debate team, started participating in class discussions, and even made several close friends. His stutter didn't disappear completely, but it no longer controlled his life or limited his dreams. Years later, when Marcus graduated from university with honors in history, he sent Simon an invitation to his graduation ceremony. In his letter, he explained that he had decided to study history because of that day at Buckingham Palace, when a kind guard had shown him that everyone has the potential to be brave and make a difference. Simon attended the graduation in full dress uniform, watching with pride as Marcus delivered the valedictorian speech to hundreds of people without hesitation or fear. The boy who had once been too frightened to speak had found his voice, and his story inspired everyone who heard it to believe in the power of small acts of kindness to transform lives.